Uh, Thank you for joining. I'm so happy you're here. Honestly, so I told one of my colleagues that even if one person shows up to this talk, that is a success for me. So thank you. So today, what I want to talk to you about is Security Hub, how we use Security Hub in a large financial organization. And just to give you some background, my name is Mahak. I work at Deutsche Börse Group. We are the German stock exchange. We are a transaction services provider. So think of it like as a marketplace for trading your securities and your shares, so on and so forth. I am a cloud platform engineer, which means I get to do the fun stuff of providing your AWS accounts, provisioning your accounts, providing your guardrails, looking at your security, looking at your compliance, the whole shebang. As you can probably tell, I am a through and through an infrastructure person. I do not dive into the world of applications, or really I stay away as much as possible. So just before we start off, do you guys use Security Hub in any way? Okay, wonderful. So we have one person. Okay. Do you mind sharing maybe just like a 2-word review? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Do you have no comments?
Oh, I do it.
Okay, please.
So it's we have a landing zone deployment in the US Control Tower. We have 16 accounts, and basically Security Hub is the way that it's the place that funnels all the findings from all the different other security services. Do I like it? Yeah, it's inclusive. I wish I could do a little bit more with the findings, remediation especially. We're having a lot of those items or findings that show up that either don't make sense to the organization or they're being handled in a different way. We tried to do integration with Teams and Slack, but that did not go well. But we're promised that there's more features coming in the next 6 months to a year. But I think it's very powerful. And I like it better than what Azure has on Microsoft side.
Oh, okay. I'm not sure what Azure has. I think they have some sort of a security control.
They do, yeah.
Yeah, all the points that you mentioned were pain points for us, and we have tried to kind of address them. So today I want to talk about our own journey into maybe getting to that point and how we can take our own workload just one step further. So just before we get into the nitty-gritties of stuff, I want to quickly mention what Security Hub is. So Security Hub is, so we use Security Hub to provide standards, to provide a baseline to see how our accounts are doing, what our security state of our accounts are. So what we do is we are able to compare our accounts, our environments with our industry standards. We can compare, okay, are we following best practices or not? We can do a whole lot of those kinds of things. Security Hub generates some kinds of alerts, and then we can act on it, we can remediate them. So currently, what we have in Security Hub, really AWS offers 3 standards, the AWS Foundations, the CIS Foundation, and the PCI Data Security Standard. Today, I want to focus on the CIS benchmark. This is probably the most widely used standard, and this is a standard that we use quite often, and really we're actively monitoring our environments against this. Now in each standard, we are given a set of checks, and those checks you can think of, they're basically config rules running in the background, which are checking your resources continuously and reporting either a fail or a pass. So if a standard or if a check fails, that means whatever resource it is evaluating does not meet that standard. And based on all of this information, we are given a security score. Now the gold standard here obviously is 100%. We want to be as close to 100% as possible, where we're completely secure, so on and so forth. But I think in my experience, between 90%, 100% is still a decent place to be in, or well, at least to start at. So today, like I mentioned, just focus on the CIS benchmarks, and a couple of those, like how we would see them in our standard is something like this. So we have a couple of checks. And as you can see, our checks are classified based on severity levels. So we have we have a critical, we have a high, we have mediums, and we have lows. And based on, when a check passes, we're given that 1 point out of our 100%. Yeah, so right now what we have is an example of a check in our CIS Foundation benchmarks, which is the VPC flow logging. So just to backtrack a bit, so when we first started using Security Hub in our organization, what we did was we just enabled our CIS benchmark, and we had all of our checks running, and we got some alerts. And we saw in the earlier slide that some were classified as critical, some were high, lows, and mediums. So based on the severity of those alerts, we would respond accordingly. So if we saw a critical alert pop up, we would make that a priority and act on it immediately. If we saw a high alert, we would act on it immediately, so on and so forth. And what I mean by act on it is remediate it. So a really good feature that Security Hub brings is, just a clickable link for your remediation actions. So if you click your link, you will be presented with a list of steps. So in this case, we have our VPC flow logging should be enabled in all VPCs. If this check fails, it means you have a VPC where your flow logging is not enabled. And in order to remediate that, you would do the following steps. Now, this seems like a perfectly easy way to do it. You would just go to your VPC console, so on and so forth, right? And it really was. It really is this simple to remediate whatever alerts you're getting. And we had this model for some time where, we were responding as we were getting those alerts. But, this works really great if you have one VPC, right? But what if you have multiple VPCs? Do you always go in and create this manually? What if you are destroying your VPC, you're recreating every other week, you're running some tests? Do you manually go in and create these VPC flow logs whenever you get an alert? I think there's possibly a better way of handling things. And remember, this is just one alert. We have a whole bunch of other alerts popping up and demanding our time, right? So one example of another alert popping up in CIS would be your credentials. So CIS tracks how old are your credentials, how old is your access key and your secret access key ID. If it's older than 90 days, it recommends you to rotate them. Now you can, set your calendars for every 90 days, keep checking, or whenever you have your alert pop up in Security Hub, you can go in and then rotate your keys, so on and so forth. But I think there's a much better way of handling this. Can anyone think of something, quickly instead of, going in and manually creating, resolving this manually?
You get them to automatically rotate for like a central storage and then retrieve that for every time you do these things.
So you said you want to automatically rotate it and get that secret wherever you're storing it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that is a really good solution, right? So that would probably mean that, okay, you have, let's say, an event in Security Hub, and that event is triggering something which is going in and creating your new keys, or maybe in this case, it is creating a new flow log. Please go ahead.
Yeah, for flow log, maybe have a rule in the governance. I don't know what AWS use, and don't let anybody to create a resource without.
Yeah, so you said have some policy of some sort,
Yeah.
Which will not allow creating.
A resource without.
Exactly. So that works great. That works for a couple of checks. But when we're thinking about more generic resolution of checks, when we're getting alerts, so we looked a lot at how we can automate this in some way. how we can bring this into an event-driven architecture. So one of the first things, even before we got into the resolution, into the remediation, was we just noticed that we have a ton of noise, right? And like you mentioned earlier, that you have some checks which are probably not relevant to you or your organization. And we figured that out that, okay, these number of checks, this list of checks is not valid for us. So we just went ahead and disabled them. Now the reasons are different. So for a check like, there's a check in here which checks if your root account is being used. We have security, our group security, that will take care of it really well for us. So that is a redundant finding for us that we don't have to worry about. So stuff like that. Number one, we figured that out, we disabled them. Then we were left with a really good set of alerts that were important to us, that were relevant to us, and we wanted to find automation, or we wanted to have some kind of the least manual interaction with them as much as possible. So we looked at event-driven architecture. So like you mentioned, we'll have some kind of an event in Security Hub or an alert in Security Hub, and using custom actions based from Security Hub, you're going to send it over to your event bridge where a rule is set up, and once it's matched, it will trigger some kind of automation, some Lambda sitting somewhere, and it will perform the remediation action. Now to kind of refer back to the VPC flow logging, how that would look like is when you have an alert that says, okay, you have a VPC which has no flow log, remediate. So you can send that custom action over to EventBridge, which will trigger potentially a Lambda, and it will go ahead and create your VPC flow log, and will send it to the right destination. Now it can be an S3 bucket, it can be just your CloudWatch logs. You can configure that part. But the main idea, sorry, go ahead.
So have you done much with Lambda in this scenario?
Yes.
You have. So where like you will go in and delete a security group, or you would delete an EC2 instance, or is it more alerts?
So, so your question is, do we delete security groups, or do we delete EC2 instances? Do we have any lambdas that would do that? So this is a really tricky question for us, because EC2 instances are really not our property. So I'm in a central team,
Sorry,
right?
let me rephrase my question.
Yeah.
How involved were you in this private Lambda function? Meaning, like, what were the actions that you kind of took based on the finding?
Oh, so
was it more of alerting, or is it more of taking an action?
Taking an action. So for example, if we look at the VPC flow log, as I was saying earlier, I'm in a central team. I have, I provision accounts for our product teams, right? So I'm not responsible, I'm not the owner of a lot of these resources the product teams are creating. What we own is our own infrastructure that we provide, right? And we are we're able to make modifications to the infrastructure that we have and we own. Whereas when it comes to resources that someone else owns, that gets a little tricky over there. But when we think of VPCs, this is something that we provide to our product teams. We will go ahead and create your VPC flow log. As soon as you create your VPC, you don't have your flow log enabled, we will go ahead and do that for you. Yeah, and obviously this is a very simplified version of what's going on. You can get as crazy, as complex with this as you like, and some checks do demand it. So for example, just on the top of my head, there's a check that sees if your credential is older than 120 days, I believe, and not used for 120 days. So there are like kind of levels of checks or levels of things that you have to verify. Okay, is it not used? Is it 120 days old? So maybe you can use one Lambda, you can use maybe some other automation in there. But the generic flow of how you would remediate and how we remediate alerts remains the same. Now, in addition to this, I've also put SNS, and you can do this in multiple ways, right? You can directly, send your Security Hub alerts to your SNS topic. Like you said, you wanted some Slack integration. We were able to do that using chatbot, and I'm happy to like walk you through what we did there. You can have just push all of your alerts there. In addition to that, you can also maybe think about, okay, your Lambda in this case did some modification. Maybe you want to notify your product teams that, hey, VPC ID XYZ was modified at this time, and this was the modification done. And you can send it maybe to an email list, one person, your Slack channel, multiple Slack channels. Uh, the opportunities are really endless over here. Yeah, please go ahead.
If I'm asking too much, just stop me.
Oh no, you're fine.
If you did you do any remediation to where you send a finding to, let's say, a Slack channel or SNS topic, and with the one click of a button you would do the approval of a remediation, just like when you push the code in the code commit?
That is not what we are doing right now, but that is a really interesting scenario for us, and we are really working towards the scenario where we would push it to a Slack channel, someone will approve it, maybe the Slack channel, maybe that message has a link to a PR, and that person will approve or deny, maybe put in some comments, and maybe someone else has to approve it, review it, and then it's pushed to your main code base. Yep, please go ahead.
So with this model, you're remediating kind of after the fact. Are you doing anything to push down? So if you're perhaps creating a VPC using file information or Terraform templates that are standard, are you just, I think the way I typically have approached it would be to go and change those templates to add plug logs into them. But do you get into problems if you remediate something that's created with infrastructure as code that you're then causing drift?
Sometimes, yes, especially when we are creating these changes in our product teams accounts. So just going back to our VPC example, maybe they have a Terraform template, which is our Terraform module, which is creating a VPC weekly, destroying, doing all sorts of things. And if we go in and make that change, yes, they will see some kind of a drift. But then that is a really great opportunity for us to educate them that, hey, this is the best practice, what you should be following, because this will result in a really secure environment for you and for everybody in this organization. So that is like a really good opportunity for us to educate our product teams. Yeah. But in addition to that, we also use like security control policies and like you said, where we can enforce it before we get alerts like this.
I was about to say the same thing.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with AWS Config?
Yeah.
So you can be.
Thank you. Okay, so now we're moving into the large financial organization part of it. All that we saw up until the first slide works really well when you have one account. I would go in and say maybe it works well if you have 5 accounts. Maybe you have a large enough team, if you have 10 people, if you have 10 accounts, maybe that works great too. But, and you have 16 accounts, you said, I don't know how that would scale for you. For us, we manage over 100 accounts, right? So we have to think about scale. We cannot be logging into each of our accounts, going into our security hub and seeing, oh, how many alerts we have, what remediations we need to do, something else popped up, what is the security score for each of our accounts. I think that does not scale well. So enter AWS organizations. So AWS organizations integrates really, really well with Security Hub. And the way we did this, and it's the way AWS also recommends, is you have your account. It can be any account. You set that account up as a delegated administrator. Now the way to look at this is consider this your master Security Hub. And like you mentioned, all of our member accounts will funnel all of their alerts over to this master Security Hub account. So what that means is, number one, you don't have to log into each of your accounts. and see what's going on, see your security score, what was it yesterday, what is it today. You don't have to do anything. You have to just go into the one console and you'll be presented with all of your accounts, what check is failing, what remediations you have in place, everything under one umbrella. This is really great, right? I think this is a really great integration. And like you mentioned, Terraform modules, Terraform templates, everything that you see on this slide, you can do it through Terraform. So you can have your member accounts, you can enable the standard, you can have your checks enabled or disabled, you can have your pipeline set up. Everything can be done through Terraform, which is great. This is something that we strive for, especially as an infrastructure team, right? Okay, any questions? Okay, awesome. Now, up until this point, I think I was very clear that, I really like to work with Security Hub. I think there are some phenomenal integrations and aspects that Security Hub brings for us as a large organization. The first part is something that we talked about just now, was the integration with AWS organizations and something called auto-enroll. Now, you may have thought over here that, okay, cool, that we don't have to log into each account and see, what the score is, what our security state in each account is. You can go to that one console, but at the very least, do I have to log into my member accounts and enable Security Hub? Thankfully, the answer is no. You can just do auto enroll. And what that means is when you have your AWS organizations, all of the accounts under your organization, they're automatically enrolled into your Security Hub, which is a great aspect for us. Now, in addition to this, what's really important for us, and which this is something that we have on our roadmap, is at account creation, we would like to enable Security Hub. We would like to enable the standard that we want. We want to enable and disable the checks in that standard that we want. And there are a couple of ways to do this. Currently, we're using Jenkins to provision accounts, but our roadmap is we would use Control Tower Accounts Factory for Terraform. So in that scenario, we would provision our accounts through Terraform. We would enable the standard that we want. We would enable and disable the checks in that standard that we want. And this would be done at account creation. There won't be two separate steps in this scenario. So this is something that we're striving for. Okay, the next one is notifications, centralized and decentralized. What I mean by that is you can send all of your alerts, whatever that you're receiving in Security Hub, to a centralized Slack channel. This is what we currently have. Sometimes it gets really crowded, sometimes it's manageable. Or you can set up per account basis where you're delivering the dedicated alert to your dedicated product team. The next one that I want to talk about is insights. Insights is more like a filter that you can have on your alerts. You can have multiple filters. You can have your account IDs. You can have your checks, the name of your checks. And what you can do is you can group all of them together and just have that in your dashboard. So for example, if you want to keep a check on your open to all security ports, open to all security groups on port 22, for example, you can have that as an insight and you can have that in your dashboard, right? So that becomes your one place where you can see, okay, are there any such insecure groups in my organization? You can also send an insight to your SNS topic, and it will deliver wherever it's supposed to. Right, go ahead.
Are you aware of any way to export those findings? So like a CSV or Excel or?
We don't do that, but
Do you know if there's a way?
I don't know if there's a way, yeah. But we can find that out together. And the next point that I want to talk about, which probably, sorry, do you have a question? Sorry, okay. And the next point that I want to talk about is the integration with other security tools. Now, obviously, Security Hub is not the only security tool that we use in our organization. We use a lot of AWS provided tools. So for example, our inspector, guard duty, Macy, they all do different things. They all have their own consoles. They're all generating some findings and alerts and some recommendations. Now, you can obviously go into each of your consoles and see what's going on. You can take actions. You can, recommend people or your product teams to perform those actions. And that can work maybe for like 2 accounts, 5 accounts, maybe 10, 15, 16 accounts. But when we're thinking at scale, when we have over 100 accounts that we govern, for us, it's really awesome that integrations for security tools like Inspector, Guard Duty exist with Security Hub. And what that means is all of the findings for each member account, for Inspector, for Guard Duty, you can funnel all of those alerts to your delegated administrator. And this is what that looks like. So each of your member account, maybe even it has integration with Trusted Advisor, you can funnel all of those alerts over to your Security Hub delegated administrator, which means that in one console, you see everything. So your Security Hub really and truly becomes your hub where you can govern and we can see all of your security scenario for all of your accounts. I believe last week they published a new integration with config. So now all of your config rules, if they're compliant or not, can also be published in Security Hub now, which means you can automate. So which means if something is non-compliant, you can have something like this, maybe with something like event-driven architecture over here, where you can remediate things once you start getting those alerts. One last point over here is the Jira Service Management, that integration. So we spoke about, having maybe interacting with resources that do not belong to us. So like EC2 instances that we don't own. We do not want to touch that because we don't own them. So we identified a couple of checks within our standard that, that need some kind of manual intervention. It needs some manual approval. For whatever reasons. And we chose to deliver those alerts to our Slack channel. So at least at the bare minimum, we know that there are some resources and we need to act on them, right? One integration that we're looking forward to is with Jira. So in this case, what would happen is every time there's an alert for your list of alerts that you want, a Jira ticket will be created and it will be sent to the owner of the asset. And the owner of the asset comes from your owner tag. So for example, if I create an EC2 instance and for whatever reason it's creating an alert, a Jira ticket will be immediately created and it will be sent to me. So then it is my responsibility. I'm held completely accountable for whatever is going to happen to the resource. And that really solves our issue for, manual intervention coming from our infrastructure team side. I had a demo planned. I don't think it's gonna look good today. So let's skip this. Okay, so it seems like for the last, it seems like 30 minutes or so, I've been just raving high praises about Security Hub. But like you said, there are some things that I still think that can, just elevate my own experience just that much more. And the first one that I want to talk about is, and this is based on my experience, this is all my own opinion. The first one that I want to talk about is ability to create my own standard. So now what we really saw was, okay, we have our CIS Foundation benchmark, which is great, but there also exists AWS Foundation benchmark, and some checks in that standard, they're really great, and we want to use them. But the only way to use them is to enable that standard and disable all the rest of the checks. Can you do it? absolutely, you can do it. But is this the most elegant way of doing this? I don't think so. For me, what I would like to see is, like a platter of checks, let's say, and picking and choosing the checks that are most relevant to me and to my organization, and creating my own custom standard. So when we're creating your new account, hopefully through through Control Tower, instead of pushing the Security Hub standard that comes right out of the box, we can push create our own custom standard and have that set up in the dashboard, like how we saw earlier. And the scoring system would still remain the same in this case. So that really would push us. That really would push Security Hub into just that much more user friendly, even, or maybe just that much more infrastructure governance friendly mode. The next thing I want to talk about is scoring. Now, right now, what we have is a very flat scoring system. And what that means is each check has the same amount of weightage points-wise as the next check. So we saw that we have checks which are classified by severity. We have some criticals, some highs, some mediums, and some lows. They're all weighed equally. Now we can have a scenario, and we did have a scenario where, let's say, for example, your one standard has 10 checks. This is just a hypothetical. You have 10 checks in your one standard. One is a critical, one is a high, the rest are a mixture of lows and mediums. This is the classification by severity that was assigned. What you can have is your mediums and lows can pass. 8 out of 10 checks are passing, but your critical and your high failed. So 2 out of your 10 checks failed, which means that you're getting a score of 80% in your security score. 80% is not a bad score. It can definitely be better, but it is not the worst score, right? But is it a true representation of what your security hub or what your security scenario is? I don't think so. You can have a whole lot of security groups open to the world on port 22. That check will fail, but because the majority of your checks are passing, you will get a score of 80, 85%. That is not ideal. That is not ideal for us. What I would love to see is some kind of a weighted scoring system, where the criticals would get more weightage, your highs will get like the next maximum amount of weightage, so on and so forth. So that would truly reflect, our security standard, our security scenario. And the last one for today is organization-wide disabling checks. Believe it or not, you cannot disable checks for all of your member accounts through delegated administrator. You have to run a script that will go into each of your member accounts and disable the check that you want. Is it doable? Yes. AWS provides the script themselves. It works great. But I think you can obviously make this better. I feel that this option should be available in the console, where if you disable one check in your master account, I should be prompted, do you want to disable this check in all of your member accounts? Yes or no? And then it would run that script. And that brings us to the end of my talk. I'm open to questions. Please go ahead.
So you said it has interaction with Jira. Like, how verbose is that? Can you like tag different teams on it so it gets auto assigned to the right product team or something like that? Or
I don't know how the Jira integration works. We have not gotten to that part yet. But I think, so based on your tags on your resource, you can like assign it to whoever.
Jira has an open API, you can do that.
okay, through
You
this.
can do it on Lambda.
Please go ahead.
AWS has got a whole lot of security services. Do you think together they're comprehensive enough that you can rely on just using the AWS provided services, or are you using third-party services in addition?
We do use third-party services in addition to AWS provided services. That is also because we don't just have cloud environments. We have some on-prem stuff, we have some hybrid stuff. So we do use like a combination of what's available.
Are there particular gaps that you think AWS has, or is it just because you have that existing infrastructure?
I think it's because we have our existing infrastructure. So one of our journeys was one of our topics to discover was really what in our cloud environment, what are we not monitoring? What is open? What are we not looking at? So that was, I think we got to this point after a lot of trial and error, seeing, okay, we are seeing this, but we're not able to act on it. We're not even able to see this. So how do we see this? So we use, a combination of AWS and some third-party tools. Thank you. Anyone else? Please go ahead.
So other than Security Hub, what are the other AWS security tools that you find like really valuable and why?
I think Inspector is a really valuable tool because Inspector looks at OS level vulnerabilities. Security Hub and the checks in Security Hub do not look at OS level vulnerabilities. I think that brought us a lot of value just recently. Other than that, I think even Macy, we use Macy extensively to monitor our buckets. Macy is such a bucket-focused service, and you can run jobs on it. You can, really scrape your buckets to see if you have any credentials in it. Do you have any financial data in it, which is really important to us. So I think those two bring a lot of value to us, which is not covered by Security Hub. Please go ahead.
Going through your security journey, enabling all these insights, did you ever have any major oh shit moments that you could share with us, at your company? We did have 422 open to the world on this machine or something.
I do.
Well, if one person does in this round, a lot of people do. Yeah, I cannot share specifics, unfortunately.
I'll share one with you.
Yeah.
One of the findings was you have to have on the S3 endpoint, you have to have a security group. You have to specify what URLs you want to open. So one time I found that there was a finding. I went and deleted that policy and I just disabled everything. It took Jenkins down, it took the code repo down, it took a bunch of stuff down. And I had no idea.
In production?
In production. So it was bad. Be careful what you do.
Yep. Any more questions? If you want to